Welcome back to the Tour Today show. My name is Steve Fleck. Every day there is racing at the Tour. We will talk about the highs and the lows, the thrills and the spills, the tragedies and the triumphs at the Tour, aka La Grande Boucle. On each episode of the Tour Today, I will have a special guest on with me. Today, I'm pleased to have with me a sales rep for Argon-18 Bikes, as well as someone doing some important work for Wounded Warriors Canada, organizing a yearly ride in Europe for them called the Battlefield Ride. Welcome, Glen Innes.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Pleasure to see you, Glenn. It's been an odd and unusual year. We were just talking off camera about how strange it has been. I know you're a sales rep, but you don't actually go out and sell directly to people anymore. It's all virtual, just like we're virtual today.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a change for sure. It's funny, my phone just rang with one of our customers. It's been a bit of a change. A regular day for us is, your 8-hour day is your 5 hours in the car, driving from retailer to retailer to shop,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't do that anymore.
Right.
So it's all virtual. It's all taking phone calls. It's all responding to emails and trying to put out any kind of fires that are happening right now, because everybody needs a bike today.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes they're just not there, and you've got to go and find one.
Yeah, we'll get into that a bit later on about your role, about the role of a bike rep. What's it all about? And I know you've got some special stories about being, in the bike business and your involvement and the brands you've worked for, involvement in the Tour de France. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. I want to thank everyone who has tuned in to watch the Tour today. Just a reminder that if you do have questions for me or my guests, probably the best spot to reach me is via Twitter. Send those questions to @Steve Fleck. Wow, Glenn, stage 7, unbelievable. All the talk was that this was going to be a nothing stage. The sprinters were going to battle it out. It was 168 kilometers, a little lumpy in the early part, the mid part, but then pretty much a downhill run into Lavour. And they thought that it was going to be a massive bunch sprint for the sprinters at the finish line. It turned out to be nothing like that.
It was a crazy day, Steve. Like, I tuned in early thinking exactly that. I'll have a coffee and watch and just kind of have it playing in the background. But there's that old adage in monster truck racing: we'll sell you the entire seat, but you'll only need the edge. I sat on the edge of my seat from about 50K in and watched that race. And when they split apart and the lead group drilled it up to 62 kilometers an hour, I was wondering, what are they going to sprint at if this is their lead into the final kind of 10K?
Yeah, that split came at about 35K to go. It was Ineos Grenadiers that really lit it up there. As you had said, 65 kilometers an hour, absolutely drilling it to split the front group. But the real action started very early on, almost from the get-go. Bora Hansgrohe team with Peter Sagan forced the pace early on over that lumpier terrain and through a couple of the mid-stage climbs and the intermediary sprint. And that caused the split that lost all the sprinters. Like, basically all the sprinters formed, the key sprinters formed a gruppetto at the back of the pack early on. And then that split that you had just mentioned that Ineos formed, that distanced a couple of the key GC people back about a minute back before they even got to the finish line. So those time gaps we're going to get to those when we talk about the jerseys, were significant for some of the GC favorites.
Absolutely, it was. And, one of my favorite riders was right there to the end, and Bossenhagen.
Yeah.
And, he is, I was so hoping he would pull that out. When I saw he made that gap, I thought, this is his day.
He was right at the front. He had a great lead out. And I know you're a big fan of Edvard Boasson-Hagen from your days working at Cervelo. He rode for Cervelo-sponsored teams for a number of years. So no surprise that he's a favorite of yours. But I thought he had it. He had timed that perfectly. But it got a little wild and woolly. And then another win for Wout van Aert.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. Like, where he came from way back.
Yeah.
Not even mentioned. And then, boom, over the line.
Well, they talked about that on the coverage I was seeing, or probably you're seeing, the Flow Bikes coverage. It was going to be an unusual sprint, and it was unusual that Boasson-Hagen did have a lead-out guy with him there, because most of the the riders that could have sprinted for that stage, they would have had to freelance. There was no traditional sort of lead out trains for them to work off of. So they had to freelance it a little bit and figure it out on their own. But Wout, unbelievable. He is definitely the rider of the moment. I would say a true heir apparent to that classic all-rounder cyclist crown that Peter Sagan has had for years.
Well, and you bring up Sagan, like it must have been a mechanical. I think he dropped a chain or something going in, because that was his race to win today.
Yeah. Bora Hansbrough had set it up well for him. They got him in the front group. It was a sort of a flattish run into the finish and a slight headwind sprint into the line. So it was setting up well for him. And I think he did, as you had said, he had a bit of a mechanical problem. He swung kind of wildly from the right to the left and had some contact with another rider, and then it looked like the chain came off or something, and he just backed right off, and he was out of it. Big losers on the day, as I mentioned, on top of those the GC riders on the GC. Some of them are worth mentioning. The young Slovenian rider Tadej Pogačar, Esteban Chavez for Mitchelton Scott, Boca Mollema for Trek Segafredo, Mikel Landa for Bahrain McLaren, and Richie Porte for Trek Segafredo, Glenn, all were right up there in the GC. They lost over a minute today.
Yeah, unbelievable. To me, the biggest loser of the day is Richie Porte. Like he was lined up to do some really good things for Trek Segafredo, and I don't know if he'll be able to get back now.
Well, it may not seem like a lot. They lost approximately a minute on the run in based on that split that formed at about 35K. But I mean, this is proving to be a highly competitive tour. We're finished on the first week, and the terrain has been brutal. The racing's been crazy and wild, and it's still really only seconds at the front. And so to lose a minute at this stage is pretty significant.
Well, and tomorrow's going to be kind of the decision-making day. If those guys who lost that time today that you mentioned, they're going to have to battle hard through the mountains tomorrow. Yeah,
big stage tomorrow. It's short, relatively speaking, Glenn, 140 kilometers, but they take on three major well-known Category 1 climbs in the Pyrenees, the Col de Mente, the Portobello, and the Col de Peresord, and then a downhill run to finish in Lourdenville, which is where they will rest tomorrow night. Let's just review the jerseys. Adam Yates, obviously still in yellow, Primoz Roglic in second, and Guillaume Martin, the French hope there, sitting in third. It's been a good tour for him so far. As I mentioned, Peter Sagan we talked about it. Sagan didn't end the day as he was hoping, Glenn, with a stage win, but he's back in the green jersey, which should make him happy. Sam Bennett falls back into second there. Big loser on the day, Bennett over 9 minutes down, but not really that important for him because he's more for points in the jersey. And Wout van Aert, keep an eye on Van Aert in the green jersey competition. He got some major points based on the finish today. He moves up into third spot. Egan Bernal will take over the white jersey as the best young rider. Again, the big loser there, the young Slovenian and 21-year-old rider riding for UAE Team Emirates, Tadej Pogačar. He loses a lot of time in the white jersey, dropping back to fourth spot. Benoit Cosnefroy still retains the KOM. Now, that could make some big changes and some big challenges for Cosnefroy with the three Category 1 climbs coming up tomorrow and KOM points on the line. But he has a good lead in the KOM competition, the young rider for AG2R Le Mondial. He's got 25 points. Michael Gogol from the NTT Pro team is sitting in second spot there. And EF Cycling, EF Pro Cycling, EF First Education, they are still in first in the team competition. So, Glenn, let's just quickly go back to stage 8 tomorrow. What are you predicting? Are we going to have a big GC battle with the GC guys battling it out to the end and the finish, or a breakaway is going to take it? My prediction is we're going to have a breakaway with someone probably going after KOM points.
So here's my thought. My boy was right there to the end today.
Yep.
He's got tired legs, but he is going to, the way Hushoff beat the guys over the mountains a few years back, and went away and nobody went with him. I think Bossenhagen, it's his day tomorrow. I think your GC guys will be battling out, and they'll be covering each other on every climb. There'll be attack after attack and cover after cover. But I think it's going to be somebody going away early and then getting away from that breakaway and soloing in.
Could be. All gets underway tomorrow. 140 kilometers, so not terribly long for a mountain stage, but some pretty brutal terrain. If you look at the actual profile, has that classic sawtooth profile. They'll do a second day in the Pyrenees, and then Monday will be the rest day. Glen, you talked a bit about what it's like to be sort of a sales rep. What are some of the other sort of ins and outs of being a sales rep in the bike business in normal times? We talked a bit about, what it's like when you're in the COVID-19 times. You're not getting out to see your customers and clients that much. But what's a normal day look like for a sales rep in the bike business?
Well, Steve, it's not to say it's a normal day. It really isn't. It's different every day. If I worked in an office and I knew what I was doing every day when I went into the office, and, if I was a teacher, I go and teach every day. I know what I'm doing there. Every day when we wake up, it's, you plan for the day tomorrow, but you get up, you open up your computer, you look to see any emails, texts that come through. And sometimes you got to call an audible because there is a fire that needs to be dealt with. And you make sure that happens. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people bikes who need bikes ASAP. And you kind of manage that expectation through your partners. And I'm talking to people every day about bikes, and it's always been a joy of mine. So I've never really had a real job, I would say, because it's just fun. We run into each other at events all the time, and we love shooting the breeze about what's going on, like we're doing today. And it's talking bikes with people, like-minded people. So it's quite a fun quite a fun career to have. And like I said, it has its ups and downs, but mostly it's you're talking what you enjoy every day.
Now, the COVID-19 crisis, obviously, we hinted at that with the earlier discussion, and you did just now talk about sort of more the normal situation. Things have been unusual this year in the bike business. Sales have been, off the charts, particularly for lower end bikes, probably less than $1,000, and like a real shortage, of bikes all across the world, literally, and the supply has been completely exhausted. That's been good news for the bike business. It
has been good news. It's also been bad news because we still got quite a few people looking for bikes and quite a bit of the year left. The challenge that we all have is there's only so many bicycle producers in this world. And everybody is clamoring, every brand is clamoring, trying to get their space to get their bikes pushed through sooner. So, as a smaller boutique brand like Argon-18, we have to be very strategic in who we partner with and how we forecast our products. Like we've forecasted our 2021 product line and put our order in at the factory back in May. And why we did that is because we saw the wave coming, and we knew there was going to be a lot of need for bikes. So we were hoping to get to the front of the line so that we can meet our customers' needs as well as everybody else.
Now, you've had the great pleasure of working for two well-known bike brands, Argon-18 right now, sponsored the Astana team for a number of years. And then previously you worked for Cervelo, sponsoring various teams for a long time. How important is the Tour de France, for the bike business in general and those brands that are involved, with it at that level?
Well, I think in normal times, what it does is get people excited about riding bikes again. This time of year, I question how many of the general public actually know what's going on. And, everybody thinks restrictions are going on and things like that. And the Tour is doing what they do. And Monday's going to be a big day when they do their first round of testing, or second round of testing, sorry. And if they've got three athletes in there, that could be the end of the Tour. So, but the Tour for me, it's about creating excitement around the coffee shop. It's about creating excitement. Oh, did you see that race? Like what we did this morning, talking about the racing and things like that. And it brings cycling to the forefront. So is it important? Absolutely. Does it sell more bikes? I don't know. But what it does is get people talking about bikes and cycling and what we all love.
Yeah, I hear you on the excitement part and the passion and people talking about that. I mean, there was the adage for a long time in the business, race and win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Does that still work? Like when, a bike brand does well, when it, wins a stage, when it, wins the Tour de France, does that mean more sales?
Yeah, it used to, absolutely. But we've seen a morph into more of a lifestyle type of advertising and things like that. Like you don't see a lot of, whether it's through social media, Instagram, things like that. There's not a ton of race specific advertising. It's more lifestyle driven and things like that. What if you're involved with the Tour, what it does is confirms what you're doing with your bikes at the highest level. It's saying, we are this caliber bike, and it just justifies what you're trying to do in your engineering. And we take a lot of feedback from pro riders because they're the guys at the top of the game. And they know all the nuances. They spend all their life on their bike. And so it's important on that side, but I don't think it's kind of race on Sunday, sell on Monday mentality anymore.
Yeah, just going back to your point, I remember long conversations with both Gerard Verman and Phil White, co-founders of Cervelo, as you well know, good friends of yours, and that input, from the riders over the course of time, the Boasson Hagens of the world, the Tor Hushovds of the world. I know both Gerard and Phil, took the input, from those top level riders that were sponsored by Cervelo at the time, very seriously. And it went right into the engineering and design, of the bikes. That was, part of the whole Cervelo, story, at
the
Cervelo
time. Test team. Yeah. The test team came out of that. Phil and Gerard saw a unique opportunity to get some of the best riders in the world to help develop the bikes, as opposed to saying to them, here's your bikes, go ride. They helped develop the bike lineup. Like Tor Hushovd had a huge influence on that S series, the new S series lineup back then, and it was game changing at the time because the industry didn't have access to the bus, and through the test team, we were able to have that access to the bus and get inside and access to the mechanics, access to the soigneurs, access to the all of it, and it was kind of groundbreaking at the time.
Now, you've been lucky, not to keep dwelling on Cervelo, because I know you don't work for them anymore. Argon-18 is who you work for and represent now, but you've got an extraordinary story about your first day, literally your first day of work when you started working for Cervelo a long time ago. Give us the sort of the brief sort of recap of that first day on the job, quote unquote, for Cervelo.
So I started work with Cervelo in 2008, and I owe a lot of what I have in my life today to what they have given me. Through Wounded Warriors Canada came to me through Cervelo, and I've been able to travel around the world and do some fun things because of them. So talking about, I don't have a problem talking about what I did for them in the past, seeing I'm with one of their competitors now, but that, that times change, things like that. So in 2008, Phil and Gerard made a deal with the CSC team at the time. And they said, when you become top team in the world, we will bring our staff to cheer you on at the Tour de France. And that was 2008. So my contract was the Thursday afternoon, was my first day on the job of Alpe d'Huez. We're standing at the top of Alpe d'Huez. We just rode it that morning. We're standing at the top watching Andy Schleck come through, watching Carlos Sastras come through, and ultimately take the jersey off Schleck and ride it into Paris.
Yeah.
So it was, I would say, the best day of first days ever. Like, I don't know any more than anybody else who may have a better story. I'm sure there is one out there, but it was a pretty good day.
In the bike, in the bike business, that's about as good as it gets. You know, you travel all the way across the ocean to go and then be there, and the guy on your bike for the company you just started riding takes over the yellow jersey and then goes on to win on one of the most famous climbs. You know,
absolutely.
It was Alpe d'Huez. If it was some other climb, it wouldn't have quite the sort of the impact. Yeah. But of course, it had to be sort of at Alpe d'Huez. You know, one of the most famous climbs in the whole.
And I got to climb on Stuart O'Grady's bike that day as well.
So. Oh, there you go. Famous rider, Paris-Roubaix winner, and on a Cervelo. Yes. So good job, Stewie. So when you mentioned some of this before, but that feedback that the riders, you know, give, you know, to a brand, and more recently, I know that Argon-18 had been working with Astana. Did that sort of carry on, and the feedback you received from various riders on the Astana team to the design and engineering people at Astana, did that help sort of establish what the sort of the Astana lineup looks like and feels like now?
Yeah, I would say it did. We've had a few feedbacks from guys like Lopez and such on our super lightweight Gallium Pro and the Gallium Pro disc. It's one of the lightest bikes out there, one of the stiffest bikes out there, and it's what, you know, he rode to his Spanish championships and rode to quite a few stage wins, both in the Giro, the Tour, and the Vuelta. And so a lot of that feedback we get directly from the team and the team mechanics comes back to our engineers, our smart guys, and they're able to translate that into the feel of the bike. Then these guys get to try them out again, and then hopefully we've hit the mark of what they're looking for, and then they give us feedback saying, oh, it's too soft here, it's too stiff here. Me and you, I couldn't tell our engineers what I'm feeling. I just feel it's really comfortable or really stiff. I can feel that, but I can't get into the nuances that some of these pro riders can. Now, it's not all pro riders. Some of them are very good. Some of them have been told to ride their bike fast, and that's what they do. They go out there and ride their bike fast. They don't really think about what goes into it.
Right. So when the riders finish the stage, they're done, and they hand the bikes back to the mechanics. There's a whole thing that goes on there, you know, with the mechanics overnight, you know, with the bike. I mean, their day literally begins, you know, when the riders hand those bikes off to them. Very quickly, sort of what happens to the bike? Is it completely like gone over? Or like I've heard like the bike, you know, it's all new, you know, Grupos on the bike. Like what typically happens to a bike, you know, overnight, you know, when it's handed into the mechanic and then the rider picks it up the next morning to start the stage?
Well, the hardest working guys in the world are bike mechanics during the tour. They get no sleep. Mm-hmm. They've got to travel from the previous town to the start line to the finish line while the guys are racing. So there's all that stuff going on. And then I had the pleasure when we were on top of Alpe d'Huez, we were up there for 4 days and getting to chat with some of the mechanics and watch what happens when they bring their bikes back in. Mm-hmm. And depending on who the rider is, it's like we're Canadians, it's like hockey. You know, you talk about these guys switching their gloves every period or their skates every game. It depends on who the rider is. Some riders are like, yeah, here it is, perfect. They hang it up and get it ready for tomorrow, just make sure that everything's running smooth, get a quick once over. And then there's some riders who are like, you got to take it apart, strip it right down, build it right back up, new bar tape, new this. And so it's very I think it's depending on the team and depending on the rider in specific, what their needs are on a daily basis.
Right. Right. So we've got electronic shifting now on the mid to high end bikes. Disc brakes seem to have, really infiltrated, mid to high end bikes. They've been popular in, mountain biking for years. Now, road bikes, even triathlon bikes, fully disc brakes, aerodynamics continuing to be refined. What's the next big breakthrough that we're going to get? I sense we've kind of reached a bit of a plateau, but is there a new big breakthrough that's coming?
Well, if you think about it, the bike in essence really hasn't changed. It's got a drivetrain, your legs power it, and it's got two wheels. Mm-hmm. So there really hasn't been much of a change in the bike in the last 100 years, except these minor little things. Saying electronic shifting is minor, it's anything but. Saying disc brakes is minor, it's anything but. But what I think the next big thing is connectivity in the bike. Mm-hmm. We've got electronic shifting, we've got power meters, we've got our GPS computer out front, we've got all this stuff. I believe it's going to be an integration of all that data collected in one device that's actually built into the bike. And then maybe you plug that bike into your computer when you get home, and boom, all the data junkies get to read everything they want to hear, whether it's barometer, wind speed, power, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be, you're basically going to plug your bike in, and it's going to download or upload it all to whatever app you're using or whatever device to get all that information from.
Right. Last question. Obviously, we've seen a huge surge, Glenn, in the popularity of gravel. Gravel riding, gravel racing, gravel bikes. It's really been, I would say, the biggest growth area, like in the bike business, the mid to high end sort of bike business, probably in the last 3 to 5 years. Is the gravel thing peaked, or has it still got legs to it?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was just looking at my gravel bike this morning, going out on it. I think the future, there's a couple of reasons. Safety is key. We're hearing about more riders on the road means more potential for an accident. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people are taking that to heart. So if you can get off the road and ride on rail trails, ride on dirt roads that are not regularly traveled, it is definitely a safety factor. Comfort of a gravel bike, and it's a different world. The gravel world is not, look sideways and put your head down and grind it out like it is on the road. It's about riding to a destination, to a coffee shop, having a coffee, to a pizza place, to a microbrewery, having a beer, and then riding home. It's more the essence of why we all got into it. It's that fun side of things. So is it going to be carrying on? I certainly hope so. I think what we'll see is a melding of the two, that traditional road bike and more of a gravel bike. Like we've got one, it's called the Krypton. And it's the best of both worlds. It's that one quiver bike. You can put your skinny 28C tires on there. It's hard to believe I'm saying 28C is skinny, but you can put your 28s on there and bang out 100K on the road, and then go put your 40s on it and go ride the rail trail. Yeah. And it's an unbelievable, comfortable bike. And I think that's where the world is going, is into that kind of hybrid model of road, gravel, and finding what that sweet spot is.
And maybe just having one bike in the garage as opposed to 5.
Well, N+1 is the rule, right?
Yeah. You've been watching the Tour Today show. My guest today has been Glen Innes, sales representative for Argon-18 Bikes. My guest tomorrow for Stage 7 of the Tour Today show will be Aaron Berasini, a former editor of Triathlete Magazine and a widely published freelance writer. Glen, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve Fleck. On behalf of the whole team at Endurance Zone TV, thank you for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the Tour Today show.